Hey guys, I am Ibigandscary. I'm bringing you another StarCraft 2 replay. This one featuring LiquidTLO in the bottom left corner playing the red Zerg, and in your top right you have StarTale's Bomber playing the blue Terran. Everybody knows Bomber, everybody knows LiquidTLO. Bomber is some badass who used to play StarCraft 1. He kept coming up with ingenious different strategies and little quirks that you can manipulate the game with, and so he's pretty much legendary just for remaking the game over and over and over again. And then LiquidTLO is everybody's favorite. Super nice guy, all that jazz. Never met him. I hope I do one day. This map actually is off of, this replay is off of LiquidTLO's replay pack that he posted to liquid.com. I'm gonna be going through a lot of them, I hope. If they're all as good as this game, I'm sure both guys are masters. Both guys are just the best in the world. So I'm sure we're going to get a great game out of it. So I'm prepared to see some fantastic play out of both players. Everybody knows Daybreak. I think this is Daybreak. Daybreak, small ramp leading down to the natural with a larger choke right here. We can see that Bomber's placing his barracks right by that choke. It's in this position so that when the drone comes up to scout, it's not going to see it immediately, so maybe TLO is going to think that there's some proxy cheese going on. And then the other hand, this barracks could be repositioned very quickly onto the low ground to not only shorten the rush distance between the two bases, but also to complement the taking of this wall right here. So that's clever. TLO grabbing a 15 hatch, 14 hatch. But 4 pool, so he's not too worried about any early pressure coming out of Bomber. He knows that he can hold it off. I expect he's got the money saved up. There goes the pool. So even though the hatch went down first, the pool will be shortly thereafter following. And even if that barracks cranks out Marines and Bomber sends those Marines straight down to TLO, the pressure that's going to come is going to be minimal, and Queens will be out shortly thereafter. So pressure's not going to be the worst thing in the world. TLO, completing his scout off, sees the barracks, knows that if there is anything proxy, then other things will have to be cut from Bomber's straight up build order. And when he sees that command center, he knows that any pressure that's coming out of Bomber will be severely stunted and delayed. So that barracks is mainly just to prevent any more scouting. I expect it to be repositioned shortly, and you can see on the mini-map that it already has, so that the wall off can be started. When the hatchery finishes, the spawning pool is already finished. We can see that 2 queens are going to get started at the hatcheries in short order. That means that the larva injects, the energy that's going to be built up on the queens will be stacked on top of each other, and it is one of those things that the pros will do that really helps them with their macro play. It allows them to spend more time away from their base, less time in their base, seeing to the small things. Small things going on with Bomber's base. He's grabbing 2 gas now with the 3 barracks going up completely. There's no add-on on the barracks, but once those couple of first Marines go in, I'm interested to see what add-on goes on, if any, of these barracks, because that can really tell you a lot about the build order that the player is going to use. The amount of gas that they grab can also tell you, like, TLO hasn't grabbed a single gas yet, which means that whatever tech that's coming out of him is going to be delayed, and that he's going to be favoring more Zerglings, less Banelings, or maybe even grabbing that early third if he's feeling ballsy against Bomber. With Bomber having so many barracks out on the field already, TLO is going to have to worry about the amount of pressure that can come out of Bomber if he goes greedy and grabs that third. 1 gas being grabbed, 2 gas being grabbed, 1 at each expansion. So it looks like TLO is going to be transitioning into some more tech. He hasn't moved to take that early third yet, so it looks like he's going to be deciding to tech into a specific tech tree. He does have 4 queens down, 2 designated creepers, which means that the creep spread is going to be significant, and that can definitely help, because there's some areas where the Terran can take advantage of the terrain and kind of wedge themselves into little pockets and really force the Zerg to engage in an area where that's not really good for them. See, a tech lab went down on the barracks, so he's going to be getting stem with pure Marines coming out right now and no Marauders. And this factory, it's going to be interesting to see what attachment goes down with the starport right next to the factory, and the factory throwing down a reactor. It looks like these two are going to switch so that the starport can mass produce medevacs, and we can see some heavy drop play coming out with the Marines. It's also possible that that reactor is going to use the Hellions, but it's less likely just because of the huge amount of creep coming out. Those Hellions will have a hard time making it into the base. And also I've seen some clever wall-ins right here with some Evo chambers. And so it's easy to deny that type of early scouting. See 3 Evo chambers coming down with a macro hatch in the main. Again, this leads me to believe that TLO is going to be sticking on that third base, at least for, or that's 2 base, at least for a time. That third base is not coming up. So I suspect we're going to see some aggression out of Bomber before we see some aggression out of TLO. TLO is probably going to be waiting for all of his upgrades to finish off the one ground, 1 armor. And the Baneling Nest before he deals with it. Deals with Bomber's wall off is just complete. He's going to be able to hold off any aggression that comes out of TLO for now. So looks like TLO is going to be forced to proceed down the macro building tree, basically. You can see he's grabbing a third right now. I think that's more of a reaction than an actual plan, because the third is so delayed right now. It wasn't like he was going to get a fast third. He just knew that any aggression that was coming out of him with just Banelings, we're going to have a hard time. Yeah, he could produce a lot of Banelings, take down this barracks, and make it maybe into this probe line. But he has to be concerned what's coming out of Bomber. And what's coming out of Bomber are 2 medevacs fully loaded. They were the first 2 out of that starport with the reactors. They're fully loaded up with Marines. And it looks like they're going to be heading down to this natural, which is where the lair is being morphed in, as well as a juicy Baneling nest, right for the picking. This is actually a perfect place to drop off units, and it looks like Bomber's going to do that using the buildings as a choke point, making it so that those Marines can't get surrounded. The Baneling nest is going to be focused down. TLO had to pull back his probes, lost a couple. And because he's not mining at all in this area, he's losing a lot of resources. But if those probes get transferred down into the third, he'll be able to remake some of that. The Banelings pop, they were being made before the Baneling nest went down, so they succeed in cleaning up half of the Marines, but the other half made it into the other standing dropship. So now all the queens go down. There's only 1 standing now. That's up at the main. Some Zerglings come out. That'll be enough to push back these Marines, but drones will have to be pulled in order to finish them off. Another Baneling nest is being built, this time up on the high ground, just for more protection. I really like how players are doing this now by spreading out all of the important tech trees. It's hard to knock them all down with a single drop, and also building the lair on the low ground by the natural. I've just found that if you grab a third, then it's less likely for that natural to go down, and the main is always the first place to get dropped because of that lair, because of that hive, because of all the tech structures there. And so a good drop down in that main can really just decimate the tech choices that you have. Barracks being repositioned to open up the front door. We can see a Viking coming out. This is pretty common and standard just because the Viking can take out a lot of the overlords, deny a lot of scouting. You can see 2 more barracks being built, as well as an armory. Armory is going to help with the upgrades, as well as get out some Thors later on. TLO has been forced to build a lot of Zerglings just to continue denying that aggression coming out of Bomber. Hasn't been able to fully saturate that third, which is what he wants right now. He wants to make it so that that third is worthwhile. But it looks like he has to do some aggression, and with that barracks being repositioned, these Zerglings can do a straight up run by into the natural, and we can see half of them coming up into the main. This is going to do a lot of damage. We can see that there was 63 harvesters for Startail, but Bomber's losing a lot of resources because he's not mining at either of his main bases. These Zergs get cleaned up. The Zerglings get cleaned up at the natural, get pushed back, but there's still plenty in the main, and they're still denying all that mining. They're going to get cleaned up too eventually, but again, this was harassment. This is keeping Startail's Bomber from doing more drop plays, which we saw was pretty deadly. And he wants to keep Bomber contained. He wants to keep him in his base. The most powerful asset that Zergs have is their ability to control the map, and that's really what LiquidTLO wants to keep. He wants to keep Bomber in his base away from those medevacs. You can see an infestor's pit's gone down with the pathogen glands. Only 1 infestor is coming out right now. There's enough gas, not quite enough minerals, but I expect to see a lot more of those infestors because their fungal growths are so good at holding those marine into clusters and allowing the banelings to detonate on them. And even if you can get just 2 fungal growths off, it's enough to deal with those marines. and it really makes those siege tanks, which we begin to see out of Bomber, more vulnerable. The Viking has succeeded in clearing up only a single Overlord, he's succeeded in pushing back all the Overlords that had vision of this area. It looks like TLO is positioning some baneling landmines around at the specific choke points. He'll burrow those eventually, but until he does, I wonder what's going on here. These Zerglings are just following around that Viking, and that Overlord came right up into the area where he knew the Viking was. It looks like maybe these are suicidal Overlords just trying to poke in and see exactly what's going on. And what's going on is that this third has been taken by Bomber, and he's built up another substantial force. We can see that he's got 45 Marines and 5 siege tanks, which is just absolutely incredibly devastating. One of the landmines goes off, though, takes out, I wonder how many took out, 37, so a couple. A scan goes down to reveal these, and it looks like the banelings that were positioned here did not burrow. But with that blow, Bomber has to pull back a little after scanning to double check for more banelings. Some Zerglings have made it into the probe line, but they burrow as soon as the main force makes it in. And we can see another Zergling rung by, half of them staying down at the natural and the other half to deal damage up at the main. Again, they're denying that harvester count, but it's also keeping that whole army contained. This army was preparing to move out. It actually moved down into the common ground, and TLO's decision to push in with his units and burrow a couple keeps that army at least partially contained. And you can see here he's got a force that could not deal with this force if it came into a full-on fight. But by keeping his force very spread out, he's keeping Bomber contained in that base, because this base is very delicate and very exposed right now. And by keeping the harassment right now, what he wants to do is force that scan. Exactly. He knew that the scan was coming eventually, but that scan is worth quite a lot of money because it's one mule that cannot be dropped. You can see the Ultralisks are coming out for TLO. What is surprising is we can only see one Infestor and a couple more on the way. The Infestors is really what I rely on in this matchup because of their ability to fungal. It's difficult to get them in close behind the siege line, but if you do, 1 or 2 hits can absolutely devastate that Marine count. But it looks like TLO is using the high armor featured in Ultralisks to do the damage he needs. A couple of Ultralisks get exposed to those Marines, and one Infestor almost goes down. But the rest of that force does make it into the base. Again, the Zerglings are going to make it up into the main, do some more damage to those Harvesters, and you can see that number is falling. He's almost lost 10 Harvesters right there, which is quite a lot. And the mineral gap is very large right now. Ultralisks continue to push in, but there is still a siege line that's intact in that area. Again, TLO has succeeded in hiding just a couple of his Zerglings. Unfortunately, Ultralisks without the support from Infestors can really get cut down even by a bunch of Marines, but there we can see a couple of those very powerful chain fungal growths and how they can just absolutely decimate a bunch of Marines. Some more of the Zerglings popping out, just doing a little bit more damage, but now Bomber is deciding that he can deal with the economic damage afforded by those Zerglings and continue to push in now with Thors and some Marines. We can see that TLO has taken his 4th right now, and that's because his main is getting mined out. He's going to stay almost at that 2k mineral income, just allowing him to constantly re-macro, constantly produce those Zerglings and some Banelings and Infestors to boot. And he's just going to continually wear down Bomber's ability to produce these units. Bomber, though, has a very significant force, and he's in the middle ground. He's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from TLO's 4th base, which is one that he needs right now, because if he loses that 4th with his main not mining, we're going to see a drastic fall in his income power. Couple of Overlords pulling in. It looks like it's going to be a Baneling drop, but they're actually completely empty. It was a feint. A lot of Ultralisks coming in from the north side of things. And I want to direct your attention at the same time to the mini-map. If you can see all that purple, all that creep just makes it so that these Overlords can close even faster. Until they get that upgrade of the Burrow charge, the Ultralisks still, their greatest weakness is the fact that they can't close very quickly. And with the creep there, it does quite a lot to mitigate that. In fact, Bomber's lost his complete army, and we can see that there's 5 Ultralisks kind of trundling up into the main. Something that hasn't happened is the destructible rocks have not gone down on Bomber's side of things, making it so that the gap and choke still exists, forcing TLO to pull back with his first force, where we had a second force coming in, taking out quite a lot of those harvesters. We can see that harvester count, which used to be 60, has now been cut in half down to 30. The main is almost mined out, but it's been harassed so many times that you can just see that there's quite a lot of minerals left here, and only 1 or 2 patches left in TLO's main. But that's because of all that harassment. All those drones have died. The force, 41 Marines, with only a couple of tanks left. These Ultralisks, if they can close to those Marines, could do damage, but without Fungals to hold them in place, without Zerglings to sweep around behind them and hold them in place, these Ultralisks aren't capable of doing the amount of damage that they need to do. But we can see 6 infestors are on the way. Once they pop out, thanks to the pathogen glands, they're going to be able to fungal these units down and hold them in place. Other things that can hold them in place are drones, which is exactly what happened there. Those Marines were caught in between the Ultralisks and the and the drones. Finally, the infestors pop. A couple of well-placed fungals go down and really just decimates that force. The Ultralisks on the north side were pushed back after taking down all of the siege tanks. A single Thor and a couple of Marines make it back into the fourth, but they haven't succeeded in taking down that hatchery. They are completely denying the mining, but at the same time, the mining is done on the main, on Bomber's side of things, so now he's only on 2 base to the 3 base TLO. This entire force is going to go down. The multiple infestors coming in with their chain fungals and the handful of Ultralisks that are left alive are going to clean up that force and basically making it so that Bomber is not fueling the force at all right now. The 2 Thors that they have on the field are scattered and they're not supported by multiple ground units. So I expect TLO just to re-macro up for just maybe 30 seconds, position his force to take out that third, which is one of the only bases that are mining. The natural is beginning to get mined out, which is where we can see a lot of mules have been spent, so that it's pretty much mined out also. So TLO is still mining on 3 bases, but Bomber's quickly becoming a 1 base play. Bomber has to bow out. It looks like his other force got caught finally by some more infestors and some Ultralisks, and with this 5th coming down on TLO, Bomber knew that he couldn't afford to take an expansion. This one was denied by creep spread. This one's denied by creep spread. And this one was taken. And this one's going to get denied by creep spread. So it's all gone. Poor Bomber. He's caught. Thanks, guys, for watching this. Thanks, TLO, for posting this. And if you guys have a comment, you could post me a comment. If you have a game you want me to cast, you could message me. That would be awesome. Otherwise, I will see you guys around. I'm Ibigandscary. Bye.